Well, something that was great for me as the commander of this flight was not only did we launch on time, we launched 2 days earlier than the initial scheduled date when I was assigned as the mission commander. It started here at about midnight as we walked out of the crew quarters and manned up the Astrovan. And a few hours later, the main engines lit to take us on up into orbit. You feel that rumble of the engines when they light outside, but you're not really sure till the SRBs light. Then there's a tremendous bright light reflecting off of the launch platform. It looks like somebody's welding right outside your window. And then you feel the kick in your back, and you know you're off.
And as you can see, we go through the clouds here at about 3,000 feet. I guess folks are a little concerned with weather, but pretty soon we're VFR on top, and we're off on our way to space. SRBs are kind of a bumpy ride. You're getting shook around. It was interesting around Mach 3, it smoothed out, and then shortly thereafter, the SRB sept, and folks on the ground at night got this beautiful view of the two SRBs as they tailed off and sept from the orbiter and looked kind of like a point of light, like a star going off into orbit.
Once we got to orbit, the real work of the mission started opening the payload bay doors and getting about the business of turning our rocket ship into an on-orbit spaceship. We had to convert the middeck to a working area, set up the tools and the spacesuits in preparation for the spacewalks upcoming.
Prior to the rendezvous, as is normally done on flights like this, we check out the robot arm. The robot arm was a tremendously enjoyable piece of gear to operate, and in our case, it checked out fully, completely, as it always does. It's a very reliable piece of gear.
None of our simulators can fully prepare you for everything you're going to see during a rendezvous. Number one, the beauty of the real satellite as compared to our visuals, but also the sun in the real world and the confusion you can get on the flight deck just from the number of people who are up there helping out with the task. It really is a team effort with everybody providing an input. But we managed to stabilize the telescope like this in the COAS and bring it down so Steve could grab it.
Scotty and SOX were responsible for the first 330 miles or so, and my job was the last 10 feet. They did such a good job with their part that my job was easy. We were able to grab it, and for SOX and me, it was enjoyable to get to see it again, and got it berthed on the FSS so that the real mission operations could begin with the EVAs.
All right, here we are. This is a couple days into the flight. We need to check out the EMUs first. As you know, these EMUs were updated. That's a new configuration that we hope to have on station. Once they're all checked out, it's time to don the suits for the first of the EVAs. I've got my Green Bay Packers hat on here, which I wore every day, and I'm sure that was one of the forces that kept us, you know, on target the whole time. This is coming out of the hatch the very first day. It seems like I'm having a little trouble. I can't figure out why, but you have a lot of cords and the umbilicals, and you also have tools in the airlock, and a lot of times it's hard to kind of get out the door. But once we get out, you can go ahead and start setting up for the day. The manipulator foot restraint handle was detached, and it was developed here at the Johnson Space Center. Real good job on that. We went up and hooked it on to the MFR and went to work.
The first day, the first of the 5 EVAs, was spent removing 2 large refrigerator-sized objects from the telescope. Here I am pulling out the FOS instrument. These instruments weighed between 685 and 850 pounds. After we pull out one of the old instruments, we then go get one of the new ones out of the payload bay, and this is STIS coming out. Of course, these boxes are designed to increase the scientific returns that Hubble will have. We are putting STIS into the telescope here. Unfortunately, it happened at night. The major 3 boxes that we installed all occurred at night, so it made it a little bit more difficult task, and that just is a matter of timing. After you put a new box into the telescope, you stow the old box, and this is stowing the GHRS box. I might add that these scenes are all sped up to some extent, about 5 times the normal speed. Everything goes a lot slower in space. This is just another view of stowing GHRS into the payload bay. You might notice over my left shoulder there's a gold-colored box. That's a new camera we had on board that actually brought the ground into the work envelope, basically, and looked over our shoulder, and you'll see pictures of that in the upcoming scenes. The EVA took about 7 hours that first day. Often we had a chance to look out at beautiful sights. Notice the external airlock here also. That was the first flight of the external airlock. A gorgeous view.
Well, after Mark and Steve had shown us how to correctly perform EVA, it was Greg and my turn on day 2. And you put your pants on a little different in space. You can put both legs in at the same time, and suit up was assisted by Doc every time. And here's Greg reporting that he was ready to go. Our job was to change one of the fine guidance sensors, and here we are working on the doors to that bay, and here is the insertion, also done at night, as Steve noted, of the new fine guidance sensor. This box weighs about 500 pounds, but in space doesn't feel like anything. Here we are stowing the old SGS to return it to home, where it will be refurbished and launched on a future mission. We also changed out one of the science tape recorders, and that's the black box that I'm holding right there. And this is a beautiful shot of the Earth reflecting off the telescope, and you can see Greg behind me to my left.
Once we got done with all the large boxes, the lower 12 feet or so has all of the scientific instruments. We started going into the bays, and there's about 15, 20 different bays that have the electronics that run the Hubble Space Telescope. In this case, I'm changing out a data interface unit, and the DIU had lost essentially half of its capability, so we put a new one in. It's a little bit tougher task than some of the normal EVA because it wasn't designed to be EVA compatible. Electroconnectors didn't have wing tabs, a lot of the other things that we tend to do, like the reaction wheel that you see here. The reaction wheel was one of those 12, 15 years ago when they first built Hubble that was meant to be changed out EVA. And when we weren't doing the work, the people inside were looking down. This is thunderstorms over the top of Houston, and it's like a string of firecrackers. It's probably the most incredible lightning display that that any of us had ever seen from orbit. So it was pretty spectacular, and you were on the other end of that. So.
I guess here we are getting to work on EVA-4. This is the solar array drive electronics box change out. That's Joe handing it off to me and then closing the lid, and I'm on the end of the arm there, and I've got it in my hands, and we go up to go to the work site. I believe this is at sunrise, so you'll see the lighting change fairly rapidly here, and this is real time. Sun goes up and goes down very quickly on orbit. Real commendation to the folks who trained us. This task was just like it was in the training process, except the screws were, although they were equally small, they weren't nearly as corroded as they were in the water. But it was a challenging task to change out that solar array drive electronics box, but it was very doable the way it was designed by the engineers. And there are Joe and I up at the top of the telescope. We're not paying any attention to the Earth up there, changing out or putting some covers on magnetometers. One of the efforts that was underway while we were out there was Scott was working on some other repairs, some patches that were designed and built up by Scott in the course of that EVA day. Joe and I actually put a couple patches on towards the end of EVA Day 4, but then Mark and Steve put on the remainder of the patches on an unscheduled EVA Day 5. That all went absolutely superbly. The design developed by the folks on the ground with the stuff available to us was just great. Real kudos to everybody that was involved in that. Towards the end of that activity, then we finished up, and it was the end of the EVAs.
With the EVA successfully completed, it was time to let Hubble fly free again, and it's a little bit, I guess, like having your kids come home from college. You know, we were really happy to see Hubble when it showed up, and when it was time to send it off, we were really happy to see it go. Once again, I got to grapple it and raise it up off of the FSS, bring it forward in the bay, release it from the arm, and then I told Scott to go ahead and execute the maneuver, which he did.
The maneuver was kicked off by firing the forward jets, and as soon as we did that, we fired the jets. The orbiter went back, and the telescope flew right over the top window. This is a view right over our heads, looking out the starboard window, and it was pretty amazing to see this large telescope fly right over our heads. The maneuver after the telescope went out of the window, took us we flew like a loop over and atop the telescope. So the next thing we saw about 15 minutes later was the telescope flying over Sharks Bay, Australia. We saw a lot of Sharks Bay.
Never got tired of it.
Never got tired. It was a beautiful sight. And then we got to see the telescope, almost like a telescope riser, set as it goes across the horizon with a beautiful blue planet in the background. It was quite an amazing sight. Of course, our calling theme the whole time was more power to the telescope, and here we are celebrating the fact that telescope has more power. Sox was in real trouble because Valentine's Day had come and gone and he hadn't written home yet. So he's catching up, and this is a demonstration of one of the real problems with using power tools on orbit. And this is a study in hydrofluid mechanics. But it's interesting to note that the little M&Ms will float right in the middle of the water ball. It makes kind of a pretty picture to show your kids.
Exercise is an important part of daily life on orbit, just as it is on Earth. But we have a little bit better view, and if you find a scene that you want to take a picture of, you ask for a camera that on Earth weighs quite a bit, and someone just passes it over to you. Sox's motto was a clean ship is a happy ship, and he got us all busy cleaning up. And we were real fortunate to get some excellent views of the Hale-Bopp comet that is still visible in the morning sky right now. Our first landing opportunity was waved off due to bad weather at the Cape, but we didn't mind. We got this extra view of Florida flying over, and you can see Orlando and the Cape and Miami.
This is what it looks like inside during a night entry. You get flashes from the plasma in the overhead windows that light up the inside of the ship, and you can see the orange glow from the fireball. That's what the orange glow looks like from the outside. And that's pretty much the view the folks here in Houston saw as we streaked overhead at a couple 100,000 feet. It was great for me. I looked out my left window, and there was Houston. I could see the street outlines, and right at the lower window frame was where the Johnson Space Center should be. This was the first flight at the Kennedy Space Center where we had centerline lights on the runway. It was a really nice addition to the runway. It gave me a good feel during the landing and the rollout for where I was on the runway. Scott did a super job getting the drag chute out, and then we tapped the brakes just to check them and make sure they worked. We really didn't need the brakes with the wind that we had that day, but as a pilot I wanted to see what they felt like. They were beautiful. Jettisoned the chute and rolled to a stop there on the runway. 103 had been a great place to live and a great place to work the whole 10 days we were up in space. And I was kind of sad to see it come to an end. It's always tough when you end the mission, you know you're not going to be spending as much time with your crew as you got to during the previous 10 days.